Daddy, was that Mom's promise? Before we go any further, tell me this. Where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? Because somewhere, at this very moment, a person is being judged before they have spoken, measured before they have been understood, and dismissed before anyone has taken the time to read the name in front of them. The sound of paper tearing was softer than Darius Bennett expected. Not loud, not dramatic, just a dry, clean rip across the polished silence of Sterling Trust Bank. Yet every face in the marble lobby turned toward it. Rebecca Hayes stood behind the service desk with both halves of the $5 million check in her hands. Her navy blazer was flawless. Her posture was straight. Her expression carried the cold certainty of someone who believed procedure had already proven her right. Across from her, Darius said nothing. He wore an old brown coat darkened at the shoulders by the morning rain. One sleeve had been carefully stitched near the cuff. His work boots were clean but worn, and beside him sat a faded child's backpack decorated with tiny silver stars. 9-year-old Maya Bennett slid down from her chair. She did not look at the bank manager. She looked only at the 2 pieces of paper drifting toward the floor. One landed near her sneaker. She bent down and picked it up with both hands. The right side of the check was gone, but the words Grace House Foundation remained visible beneath her thumb. Maya stared at the name for a long second. Then she lifted her face toward her father. "Daddy," she whispered, "was that Mom's promise?" Something shifted in Darius's eyes. Not anger. Not yet. His hand settled gently on the strap of Maya's backpack, steadying it, as though that small motion could keep the whole room from tilting beneath her. Rebecca placed the torn halves on the counter. "Mr. Bennett, presenting a fraudulent financial instrument is a serious matter," she said. Her voice was controlled, professional, almost rehearsed. "I suggest you remain here while we determine our next steps." Darius looked at the check, then at the young teller standing several feet behind Rebecca. Elena Ramirez had gone. Pale. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. On her monitor, the verification screen still showed a green authorization code. Valid. Confirmed. Rebecca followed Darius's gaze and quietly reached over to turn the screen away. That was when the glass entrance doors opened. Cold air moved across the lobby. 3 people stepped inside, led by Thomas Whitaker, Sterling Trust's regional president. His gray suit was still damp from the rain. He was speaking to the 2 executives behind him until his eyes found Darius. He stopped in the middle of a sentence. The color left his face. Then he noticed Maya holding the torn piece of the check. Thomas crossed the lobby quickly, but his voice dropped when he reached them. "Mr. Bennett," he said. "Sir, what happened here?" No one moved. Rebecca's confidence did not disappear all at once. It cracked quietly, like ice beneath a careful step. Her eyes moved from Thomas to Darius, then down to the name printed across the torn paper. Darius did not raise his voice. He did not point to his clothes, his money, or the people suddenly standing straighter around him. He simply rested his hand on his daughter's shoulder and said, "That is what I would like to understand." Before that morning ended, someone would lose the authority to run that branch. But it would not be because a $5 million check had been destroyed. It would be because of what the bank's records were about to reveal. 90 minutes earlier, the rain had been falling in a thin silver sheet over East Harbor, soft enough to ignore and steady enough to soak through an old coat. Darius Bennett stood beneath the rusted awning of a school that had been closed for 11 years. The brick walls were faded. Weeds pressed through cracks in the parking lot. One basketball hoop leaned slightly toward the street, its net long gone. Maya stood beside him in yellow rain boots, holding a blue envelope against her chest. "Was this where Mom worked?" she asked. Darius looked through the chained front doors. Dust covered the trophy case inside, but he could still see the outline of paper stars Grace had once taped across the glass. "She taught here," he said. "Not during regular school hours. Saturdays. Sometimes Sundays." Maya glanced at the dark windows. "For free. Your mother believed children should not have to earn the right to be helped." His voice stayed even, but his hand tightened around the black leather folder beneath his arm. Inside it rested a certified check for $5 million, the final payment required to purchase the property and begin construction on Grace House. The project had taken 3 years. 3 years of zoning hearings, environmental reports, neighborhood meetings, and quiet negotiations with people who considered East Harbor too poor to invest in. Darius had listened to every objection. He had answered every question. He had refused every offer to move the sinner somewhere cleaner, safer, or more profitable. Grace had chosen this neighborhood. That was enough for him. Maya stepped closer to the doors and peered through the glass. What will be inside? Tutoring rooms. A small health clinic. Counselors for children who have lost someone. He paused. And a kitchen big enough to feed families on weekends. Maya smiled faintly. Mom would like that. Darius looked down at the blue envelope. Is that the letter? She nodded. She had written it the night before at the kitchen table, printing each word slowly while Darius reviewed the closing documents beside her. She had not allowed him to read it. It is private, she had said, with the serious expression she inherited from Grace. Now she tucked the envelope into the front pocket of her silver-starred backpack. When do we get the building? When the bank processes the payment. Today. Today. The word carried more weight than he let her hear. The transfer deadline was noon. If the funds were not verified by then, the seller could accept a competing offer from a development company planning to turn the property into luxury apartments. Darius checked his watch. 10 minutes past 8. Sterling Trust had a branch less than 2 miles away, close enough for him to complete the transaction and still bring Maya to school before her first class ended. He could have called an executive. He could have sent an attorney. He could have ordered the transaction from his office without ever touching the check. But Grace House belonged to East Harbor, and Darius wanted its account managed by people who saw the neighborhood every day. He wanted the first deposit made across a local counter, not inside a private conference room 40 floors above the city. Maya slipped her hand into his. Are you nervous? She asked. Darius studied the abandoned school one last time. A little. You always say being nervous means something matters. A quiet smile reached his face. Your mother used to say that first. They crossed the wet parking lot toward his old Ford. Darius opened the passenger door, placed the leather folder carefully beneath his coat, and waited until Maya fastened her seat belt. As he started the engine, the school disappeared behind the rain. Neither of them knew that within the hour, the promise they had carried for 3 years would be treated like a lie. The Sterling Trust branch stood between a pharmacy and a grocery store, its glass front reflecting the gray morning like a polished mirror. Darius parked beneath a maple tree near the entrance and turned off the engine. For a moment, neither he nor Maya moved. Rain tapped lightly against the windshield. Maya looked at the leather folder beneath his coat. That is a lot of money on one piece of paper, she said. It is, Darius replied. But paper is not the important part. The promise is. He glanced at her and smiled. Exactly. Inside, the bank smelled of coffee, carpet cleaner, and cold air conditioning. The lobby was quiet. A television above the waiting area showed financial news with the sound turned off. Behind the counter, Elena Ramirez greeted them with a warm expression that reached her eyes. Good morning. How may I help you? Darius placed the folder on the counter and removed the certified check. Elena read the amount once, then again. Her eyebrows rose, but her voice did not change. I will need identification and the supporting documents for the account. Darius handed them over. She checked his driver license, the foundation papers, and the authorization letter. Maya climbed onto a chair nearby and held her backpack in her lap. Elena entered. The information slowly. The screen changed. A green symbol appeared beside the transaction number. The issuing institution has already attached a verification code, she said. That should make this easier. A woman in a navy suit looked up from the far end of the counter. Rebecca Hayes had been reviewing a stack of reports beside a silver coffee tumbler. Her gaze moved from Elena's screen to Darius's coat, then to the check. She approached without hurrying. What type of transaction is this? She asked. Elena straightened. A certified deposit for a nonprofit property purchase. The initial verification is valid. Rebecca did not look at the documents. She looked at Darius. Are you the account holder? I am the authorized founder and signatory. And the funds belong to you. They belong to the foundation named on the check. Rebecca picked up the paper by one corner, careful not to touch his hand. This amount does not fit a normal retail profile. Darius held her gaze. It is not a normal retail transaction. Her smile was small and controlled. Then perhaps you should have scheduled an appointment at our downtown corporate office. This branch is listed as authorized to process institutional deposits. Rebecca's expression tightened by less than an inch. We are authorized, but authorization does not remove our responsibility to protect the branch. The sentence sounded polished, reasonable, almost kind. Yet Maya stopped swinging her feet. Darius noticed. He always noticed. Rebecca turned to Elena. Place a temporary hold on the transaction. Elena hesitated. The issuing bank already confirmed the certification code. I heard you. Rebecca returned her attention to Darius. We will need additional proof of origin, documentation of the property purchase, confirmation from the issuing institution, and a full review of the foundation. Darius opened the folder and placed each requested document on the counter in a neat stack. Those are all here. Rebecca glanced at the papers, but did not touch them. That is unusual. Being prepared, he asked. Arriving without an appointment with a check of this size. Darius let the silence rest between them. He did not defend his coat. He did not explain his truck. He did not offer the history of every dollar. Instead, he placed one hand on Maya's backpack and said, Please verify the documents. Rebecca looked past him toward Walter Briggs, the security guard near the front doors. She gave him a slight nod. Walter moved closer, not enough to create a scene, but enough for Maya to notice. She leaned toward her father. Did we do something wrong? She whispered. Darius looked down at her. No, sweetheart. Rebecca heard him. Her fingers settled on the edge of the check. No one has accused you of anything, she said. We are simply maintaining branch standards. Darius raised his eyes to hers. Then apply the standards to the documents. Elena looked again at the green verification symbol glowing on her monitor. Rebecca looked only at the man standing in front of her. The first mistake had already been made. It had simply arrived wearing the language of procedure. Elena placed both hands near the keyboard, as though stillness might keep the moment from becoming worse. The green verification symbol remained on her screen. It was clear. Final. The issuing institution had confirmed the check number, the account, and the authorization code. Rebecca leaned closer, then lowered her voice. Run the institutional review again. Elena looked at her. The system already completed it. Then run it manually. Darius watched the exchange without moving. Maya sat beside him, her silver-starred backpack pressed against her chest. Walter remained near the waiting area, pretending to study the front doors. He had worked at Sterling Trust for 17 years. He knew the difference between caution and theater. This was beginning to feel like theater. Elena opened the manual verification page. Darius glanced at the screen reflected in the dark glass behind the counter. Use the secondary routing protocol, he said. Rebecca turned toward him. Excuse me. The standard review can delay a certified institutional transfer. The secondary route checks the issuing reserve directly. Elena paused. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. How do you know that? Because Sterling Trust adopted it 6 months ago. The lobby seemed to grow quieter. That procedure had not appeared in customer materials. Even several branch employees did not know it existed. Rebecca folded her arms. Information can be found in many places. Darius did not answer. Elena entered the secondary code. A second green confirmation appeared, followed by the issuing officer's name and direct extension. It is valid, she said softly. The reserve is confirmed. Rebecca stared at the result. For one brief second, doubt entered her face. Then pride closed over it. Call the number. Elena reached for the telephone. While it rang, Walter looked again at Darius. The old brown coat had distracted him before, but now he noticed the silver ring on Darius's right hand. Plain, heavy, an oak tree engraved across its face. Walter had seen that symbol once, nearly a year earlier, during a closed meeting on the 34th floor downtown. He had been assigned to the private elevator that evening. Executives had arrived in black cars and spoken in careful voices. When a man wearing that same ring entered the conference room, every person at the table had stood. Walter studied Darius's face. The beard was fuller now. The clothing was different. Still, something in the calm posture felt familiar. Elena straightened as someone answered. Good morning. This is Elena Ramirez with Sterling Trust, East Harbor Branch. I am calling to verify a certified institutional check. She provided the number, then listened. Her eyes shifted toward Rebecca. Yes, $5 million. Grace House Foundation. A pause followed. Yes, Mr. Darius Bennett is present. The voice on the other end became louder, though the words remained unclear. Elena's expression changed. I understand. Thank you. She lowered the receiver carefully. The issuing officer confirmed everything. He also asked why the transaction has not been processed. Rebecca picked up the check. Because unusual transactions require judgment, not blind acceptance. Darius looked at the paper in her hand. The verification is complete. The review is not. What remains? Rebecca glanced at Maya, then back at him. Proof that you are capable of controlling an account. Of this size. The words settled across the counter. Elena looked down. Walter stopped pretending to watch the doors. Maya's fingers tightened around her backpack straps. Darius took a slow breath. Capability is not part of the deposit requirement. It is part of my responsibility. No, he said quietly. Your responsibility is to follow the verified record. Rebecca's hand moved toward the keyboard. Through the reflection behind her, Darius saw the transaction status change from confirmed to suspected fraud. His eyes remained steady. What did you just change? Rebecca closed the window. I made a professional determination. Walter finally remembered where he had seen Darius Bennett. He took one step forward, but Darius lifted a hand, asking him to wait. Then Darius looked at Elena. Preserve the call record. Rebecca's chin rose. You do not give instructions in my branch. Darius rested his hand on Maya's shoulder. His voice never changed. Then preserve it for yourself. Rebecca's fingers remained on the edge of the check. The paper trembled once, almost too slightly to notice. Then she steadied it. This transaction is now under review for suspected fraud, she said. You will need to remain here while I contact the appropriate department. Darius looked at the green verification symbols still reflected in the glass. You have already contacted the issuing institution, and I have made a different determination. Elena lifted her eyes. Miss Hayes, the officer confirmed the funds and the authorization. He asked us to process it immediately. Rebecca turned toward her. You are a teller. I am the branch manager. The words were quiet, but they closed the space around Elena like a locked door. Maya watched both women, trying to understand why the truth on the screen did not seem to matter. Darius saw the question forming in her face. He pulled a chair closer and guided her toward it. Sit here for a moment, sweetheart. Are we going to miss school? She asked. Maybe the first class. Will they still get the building? Darius glanced at the check in Rebecca's hand. They will. Rebecca heard him. You cannot guarantee that while the funds are being investigated. Darius met her gaze. The funds are not being investigated. I am. The sentence landed without force, which made it harder to ignore. Walter shifted near the front entrance. He now remembered the private meeting clearly. Darius had arrived without an assistant, taken the last seat at the table, and asked why the bank planned to close branches in neighborhoods where families still stood in line to cash paychecks. The executives had answered with charts. Darius had answered with capital. 14 branches had remained open because of him. This branch was one of them. Walter opened his mouth, but Rebecca raised the check before he could speak. Documents can be fabricated. Calls can be redirected. People can learn internal language. Darius's expression did not change. Then call your regional office. I do not need permission to protect my branch. Protection from what? Rebecca looked toward the customers who had begun watching from the waiting area. Her face tightened. She had wanted control. Now she wanted certainty in front of witnesses. From people who believe confidence can replace credibility. Maya lowered her eyes. Her thumb moved over one silver star on her backpack. Darius noticed that too. Something in him grew still. Read the name again, he said. Rebecca looked down at the check. I have read it. Then read the supporting letter. I have seen enough. No, he said softly. You have decided enough. Elena inhaled sharply. Rebecca's hand tightened. The paper bent between her fingers. For one final second, she could have placed it on the counter. She could have reopened the verified record. She could have called the regional office and allowed the facts to correct her. Instead, she tore the check in half. The sound was dry and small. It traveled through the lobby anyway. One piece remained in her hand. The other drifted across the polished floor and stopped near Maya's yellow rain boot. No one spoke. Maya slid down from the chair and picked it up carefully. The words Grace House Foundation remained visible beneath her fingers. She stared at them, then looked up at her father. Daddy, she whispered, was that Mom's promise? Darius did not look at Rebecca. He knelt beside Maya and placed one hand over hers. The promise is still there, he said. Paper cannot take it away. Rebecca set the other half on the counter. Mr. Bennett, presenting a fraudulent financial instrument is a serious matter. I suggest you remain here while we determine our next steps. Elena turned toward her monitor. The authorization still glowed green. Walter looked toward the entrance as headlights swept across the rain-darkened glass. A black sedan had stopped at the curb, followed by another. The front doors opened, and Thomas Whitaker stepped inside with two members of the executive board. He was speaking as he entered, but his words stopped when he saw Darius kneeling beside Maya. Then he saw the torn check in her hands. His pace quickened. "Mr. Bennett," he said, his voice dropping with immediate respect. "Sir, what happened here?" Rebecca's face lost its color. Darius rose slowly, keeping one hand on Maya's shoulder. He looked at the altered record on Elena's screen, then at the torn paper, then finally at Thomas. "That," he said, "is what the records are going to explain." Thomas did not look away from Darius. "Sir, were you waiting for us?" Darius glanced at the rain on Thomas's shoulders, then at the two executives standing behind him with leather portfolios in their hands. "No," he said. "I came to complete a deposit." Thomas followed his gaze to the torn check. His jaw tightened. "Who authorized that?" Rebecca stepped forward before Elena could speak. "I did." The transaction presented multiple risk indicators, and Mr. Bennett failed to provide a credible explanation for the source of funds. Thomas looked at her as though he had not understood the sentence. Failed to provide what? Rebecca straightened. A credible explanation. The lobby had gone completely still. Even the television above the waiting area seemed strangely distant. Thomas turned to Darius. "Sir, I apologize. I was under the impression the branch had been informed that you might choose a local office for the Grace House account. Apparently, it was not informed well enough." Rebecca looked from one man to the other. "Why are you calling him sir?" Thomas took a slow breath. "Because Mr. Bennett is the controlling investor in the restructuring agreement that kept Sterling Trust independent." Rebecca blinked. The words did not seem to fit the man in the worn coat, standing beside a child's backpack. Thomas continued, his voice measured. "He is also the incoming chairman of the board, pending the final regulatory filing next month." Elena lowered her eyes, not from shame, but from the sudden weight of everything she had witnessed. Walter stood straighter near the doors. The memory of the private meeting was no longer uncertain. Rebecca looked down at the torn paper. He never identified himself. Darius's expression remained calm. "My name was on the check." "That is not what I mean. It was on my identification. It was on the foundation documents. It was on the authorization letter you chose not to read." Rebecca opened her mouth, then closed it. Thomas stepped toward the counter and examined Elena's screen. The transaction showed 2 successful verifications followed by a manual fraud flag. "Who changed the status?" he asked. Elena hesitated. Rebecca answered first. "I did, based on professional judgment." Thomas looked at the timestamp, then at the call record. "After the issuing officer confirmed the funds?" "I believe the confirmation required further review." "By tearing the instrument." Rebecca's hand drifted toward her silver tumbler, but she did not pick it up. "I was protecting the bank." Darius looked at Maya. She was still holding one half of the check with both hands, careful not to crease it further. "No," he said. "You were protecting your assumption." Thomas turned toward him. "Sir, I can have a replacement issued within the hour. We can complete the transfer through the corporate office." "The deadline is noon," Darius said. "The property seller has another offer." Thomas checked his watch. "We will make the deadline." Maya tugged gently at her father's sleeve. "Does this mean you own the bank?" Darius looked down at her. "No, sweetheart. It means I have a responsibility to help take care of it." Her eyes moved toward Rebecca. "Even when people here are not kind." The question carried no accusation. That made it heavier. Darius crouched so they were at eye level. Especially then. Rebecca looked away. For the first time that morning, she seemed to notice the child rather than the transaction. Thomas lowered his voice. "What would you like me to do?" Darius stood and looked toward Elena's monitor. "First, preserve everything. The original verification, the secondary confirmation, the telephone recording, the security footage, and the manual status change." Thomas nodded to one of the executives, who immediately opened his portfolio. "Second," Darius continued, "do not remove Miss Hayes from the building until we know whether this was one bad decision or a pattern." Rebecca's face tightened. "You think I have done this before?" Darius met her gaze. "I do not know." He looked toward Elena. "But someone in this branch might." Elena's fingers curled against the counter. Thomas noticed. So did Rebecca. The air changed again, quieter now, but more dangerous to every hidden record in the building. Darius placed one hand on Maya's shoulder. This is no longer about one check, he said. It is about how many people walked out of here believing they were the problem. Elena did not answer immediately. Her eyes stayed on the counter, fixed on a faint scratch in the wood, as if the right words might be hiding there. Rebecca watched her. Thomas watched Rebecca. Darius watched neither of them. He was looking at Maya, who still held the torn half of the check against her chest. Mr. Bennett, Elena said at last, her voice barely above a whisper, there have been other complaints. Rebecca turned sharply. Elena, they were closed before regional review. Thomas stepped closer. How many? Elena swallowed. I do not know the exact number. Maybe 12. Maybe more. Rebecca folded her arms. Those cases were resolved according to policy. Some customers were told their documents were incomplete when they were not, Elena said. Her voice shook once, then steadied. Some were asked for proof that was not required. Some were sent to other branches. The silence that followed felt heavier than the rain outside. Darius looked at Thomas. Preserve those files too. Thomas nodded to the executive beside him. Every complaint from the last 3 years. No local deletions. No edits. Rebecca's face tightened. This is becoming an accusation without context. Darius met her eyes. Context is what you refuse to read. Before she could answer, Maya reached into her backpack and pulled out the blue envelope. Can I give this to Mom now? She asked. Darius looked at the clock above the teller line. The deadline was less than 40 minutes away. Thomas noticed. We are processing the replacement electronically, he said. The title company will receive confirmation before noon. Darius nodded, then crouched beside Maya. You can read it here, if you want. She looked around the bank. Here. Your mother believed promises mattered most when keeping them was difficult. Maya opened the envelope carefully. The paper inside was folded twice and covered in large pencil handwriting. She took a breath. Dear Mom, she began. Dad did not give up. Rebecca's eyes dropped to the torn check. Maya continued. The old school still has the red doors you told me about. Dad says they will paint them again, but I think they should leave one scratch so people remember it was real before it was beautiful. Elena pressed her lips together. Walter looked toward the windows. Thomas lowered his head. There will be rooms for kids who are sad, Maya read, and food for families who need it, and people who listen without making anyone feel small. Dad says the building will be called Grace House, but I know it is really your promise with walls. Darius closed his eyes for 1 second. Only one. When he opened them, Rebecca was no longer looking at him as a suspicious customer or a powerful investor. She was looking at Maya. The child's voice had done what every document had failed to do. It had made the cost of the morning impossible to hide behind procedure. Maya reached the final line. I wish you could see it, but Dad says good things can still find people who are gone. Love, Maya. She folded the letter and held it against her chest. Thomas cleared his throat softly. The wire has been accepted, he said. The property is secured. Maya looked up at Darius. We got it. He smiled. We got it. Relief moved across her face so quickly that the entire room seemed warmer. Darius took the torn piece of the check from her and placed it beside the other half on the counter. Rebecca spoke at last. I did not know what the money was for. Darius looked at her. His voice remained quiet. My daughter should not have needed the purpose of the money to be treated with dignity. Rebecca's fingers left the edge of the counter. For the first time that morning, she had no policy ready. Darius placed the blue envelope back into Maya's backpack. You did not destroy the promise, he said. But you showed her how easily people can mistake authority for truth. Thomas turned to the executive beside him. Lock the local system from further edits. The man opened his portfolio, removed a secure tablet, and began entering commands. Rebecca stepped back from the counter. You cannot freeze branch operations based on one employee's statement. Thomas did not raise his voice. I can freeze access when a verified transaction was manually changed after confirmation. He looked at Elena. Miss Ramirez, you are protected under the bank's reporting policy. No one in this branch may alter your schedule, reduce your hours, or contact you privately about what you say today. Elena nodded, though her hands still trembled. Darius noticed and moved a chair toward her side of the counter. Sit down before you explain, he said. The kindness in his voice seemed to surprise her more than the authority behind it. She sat. Rebecca remained standing. There is nothing to explain, she said. Every decision I made was based on risk. Elena looked up. Not every decision. The room tightened around those words. Thomas placed his tablet on the counter. Start with the complaints. Elena took a breath. The first one I saw was 8 months ago. A retired teacher came in with a settlement check. Her identification matched. The issuing office confirmed it. She was still told to return with a family member who could explain the transaction. Darius's eyes sharpened. Was that written in policy? No, Elena continued. A contractor from East Harbor was asked to provide invoices for 6 years of work before his business deposit could clear. Another customer was told her cashier's check looked inconsistent with her account history. She had sold her mother's house. Rebecca's voice cut in. Those were complicated transactions. They were verified, Elena said. Just like this one. Walter looked down at the floor. He had seen some of those customers leave. He remembered the way they carried their papers close to their bodies, embarrassed by questions they had not expected. At the time, he had told himself the bank knew better than he did. Now that excuse felt small. Thomas asked, "What happened to the complaints?" Elena looked toward Rebecca's office. They were marked resolved locally. Some notes said the customers misunderstood procedure. Others said they became uncooperative. Were they uncooperative? Darius asked. Elena shook her head. Most of them were quiet. Rebecca's face changed then. Not into remorse. Not yet. Into fear. It was the fear of someone realizing the records she controlled had begun speaking without her permission. This is selective memory, she said. You are describing isolated moments without the full circumstances. Darius looked at the secure tablet. That is why we keep evidence. Thomas nodded. Security footage, call logs, account notes, complaint files, and status changes will be reviewed by an independent team. Rebecca looked at him. Independent from whom? Independent from this branch. Independent from me. Independent from Mr. Bennett. That answer seemed to unsettle her more than punishment would have. Darius did not want a conclusion written before the facts were read. He wanted the truth strong enough to stand without his name beside it. Thomas turned to Rebecca. Effective immediately, you are relieved of branch authority pending review. You will keep your access card, but it will no longer open administrative systems. You may collect personal items with a compliance officer present. Rebecca stared at him. You are suspending me in front of customers? Darius spoke before Thomas could answer. No one here needs to witness more humiliation. He looked toward the waiting area. Close the lobby for 30 minutes. Help every customer already inside. Then speak with Miss Hayes privately. Thomas gave the order. Walter locked the front doors and placed a temporary notice against the glass. Elena helped an elderly man finish his deposit. Another teller guided a mother toward the drive-through window. The lobby slowly emptied, leaving only rain, marble, and the quiet hum of computers preserving what had almost been erased. Rebecca stood near her office door. Why are you doing this? She asked Darius. Doing what? Stopping them from making an example of me. Darius looked at Maya. She was drawing a small red door on the back of an unused deposit slip. Because accountability and cruelty are not the same thing. Rebecca lowered her eyes. And if the records prove Elena is right, then the people who were dismissed deserve to be contacted. Their cases deserve to be reopened. Their fees should be returned. Their credit reports should be corrected if the bank caused harm. And me? Darius considered the question. You will face the consequences of what you chose. His tone remained calm. But I am not interested in your embarrassment. I am interested in whether this bank learns anything. Thomas returned from the counter with the first report. We found 17 locally closed complaints, he said. 11 involved verified documents that were challenged after confirmation. The numbers settled across the room. Rebecca leaned against the edge of her desk. For the first time, she seemed smaller than the title on her office door. Darius looked at the report, then at the torn check lying beneath a clear evidence sleeve. Contact every one of them, he said. Not with a form letter. With a person. Maya lifted her drawing. The red door was crooked, bright, and open. Darius looked at it for a long second. Then he turned back to Thomas. And make sure the next person who walks into this bank does not need $5 million before anyone decides to listen. 3 months later, sunlight poured through the restored red doors of Grace House and spread across the old school hallway in long golden bands. One scratch remained near the bottom of the left door, exactly where Maya had asked them to leave it. Children moved through the building carrying books, lunch trays, and drawings still damp with paint. The former library had become a tutoring room. The nurse's office had become a small health clinic. 2 classrooms had been joined to create a counseling center where families could speak without being rushed or judged. In the kitchen, volunteers packed weekend meals into paper bags while the smell of warm bread traveled through the halls. Darius stood near the entrance in the same brown coat he had worn to the bank. The cuff had been repaired again, this time with thread Maya had chosen because she said the old color looked too serious. Thomas approached him with a folder beneath one arm. "The final review is complete," he said. Darius looked through the glass doors toward the families gathering outside. What did it find? 31 accounts required correction. 12 customers were charged fees that should never have been assessed. 4 credit reports contained negative notes linked to delayed deposits. Every fee has been returned. The credit records have been corrected. And the customers? Each received a personal call. Some asked for written apologies. Some asked to speak with the review team. 2 asked us never to contact them again. Darius nodded slowly. Trust could be repaired, but not demanded. Thomas opened the folder. Rebecca resigned after the board confirmed repeated policy violations. She submitted a statement accepting responsibility. Darius did not smile. He did not look relieved. Did she blame the system? No. She wrote that the system gave her authority, but she chose how to use it. Darius looked toward the entrance. That is a beginning. Sterling Trust had changed more than one manager. Every challenge transaction now required 2 independent reviews. Customers received written explanations for account holds. Branch managers could no longer close complaints filed against their own decisions. Employees who reported misconduct were protected from schedule changes, reduced hours, and retaliation. Elena had accepted a new position on the bank's customer fairness team. Walter had joined the community advisory board, where he reminded executives that silence from the lobby did not mean nothing was wrong. Near the center of Grace House, a small room carried a simple sign, the trust room. There were no marble counters inside, no velvet ropes, no desks designed to separate one person from another. Families sat at round tables with counselors who explained savings accounts, home loans, credit reports, and small business applications in plain language. Maya stood near one of the tables, showing a younger girl how to organize coins into labeled jars. "This one is for things you need," Maya explained. "This one is for things you want. This one is for helping somebody." The girl pointed to the third jar. "What if I do not have much?" Maya smiled. "My dad says helping is not always money." Darius heard her and lowered his eyes for a moment. Grace would have said the same thing. At noon, the families gathered in the front hall. Maya carried a wooden frame covered with a white cloth. She placed it on the wall beside the red doors, then pulled the cloth away. Inside the frame rested the 2 halves of the torn check. Beneath them was her drawing of the old school, with its crooked red entrance open beneath a bright yellow sun. A small brass plate carried one sentence. What was torn that day was not a promise. It was an excuse to look away. Thomas stood beside Elena and Walter. No one applauded at first. The room simply became still. Darius placed one hand on Maya's shoulder. "Your mother would be proud of you," he said. "Of us," Maya corrected. He smiled. "Of us." Later, when the last folding chair had been put away and the afternoon light softened against the windows, Darius and Maya walked through each room one more time. In the counseling center, a father sat beside his son in comfortable silence. In the clinic, a nurse knelt to explain a bandage to a nervous child. In the kitchen, a woman added one extra loaf of bread to a family's bag without announcing it. No grand speeches. No cameras. Just people making room for one another. Maya slipped her hand into Darius's as they reached the red doors. "Did the bank learn its lesson?" she asked. Darius considered the question. "Banks do not learn," he said. "People do. Then they build better rules so others do not have to depend on someone being kind." Outside, East Harbor moved around them. Buses sighed at the curb. Grocery carts rattled across the sidewalk. Rainwater from the morning still shone in the cracks of the pavement. Behind them, Grace's house remained open. Darius had never needed anyone to respect his money. He had only asked them to respect the person standing in front of them before they knew what he possessed. He did not raise his voice. He raised the standard by which they would see the next person.